Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here with me today. My name is Panagiotis Kalantzis. I'm a seasoned security and data privacy expert working in the field for more than 25 years now, and I would like to speak to you today about information security and software development. Uh, I'm not gonna to speak about technical. I'm not gonna dive into technical details because if I would, we would need 2 or more days to discuss. Instead, I would like to spend the time allocated today to discuss why we all need to care about security and how we can um, adapt security principles in today's agile world when everyone needs to be delivered yesterday or even better. I mean, as soon as possible. So can you go please to the next slide? The, so my speech title today, long story short, software security in the modern age. How security can help agility, how we can help our companies and our customers survive in today's agile world, doing all these digital transformation tasks and projects they need to do, and do it in a secure way. And that's what we're trying to do. Believe it or not, if you want, please move to the next slide. Believe it or not, although this is the agenda for today, so I'm going to start with some perceptions, some common misperceptions actually, because in working out in the market, I hear a lot of people saying that software developers are opponents to security. Either you need to develop or do security. You cannot do both. And my first task today is to bring this perception down, to show to you that we are in the same boat and we need to cooperate in order to achieve our target. And our target is deliver securely for our customers or for our companies. Then I'm going to briefly describe why we need to do that, because the world we're living in is not a perfect world, because we are facing a lot of threats, and our products, our software that we're delivering, our what we're developing in the end of the day should be strong enough to withstand those threats. And then I'll try to give you a short overview of how security can fit into agility. We all hear about agile methodologies, we work with agile methodologies, but agility doesn't mean unstructured and doesn't mean chaos. It means order, uh, but in a quick way. So we'll see how security fits in that. And then I will propose 2 methodologies that can help all of us be agile in developing our software and at the same time be secure. I don't mean to say that we need to be super secure. We need to be as secure as necessary for a product to be strong, but also to be quick in the market. Let's move to the next slide, please, if you wish. So the first perception, the first perception is how we see ourselves, and how we see ourselves, meaning in both. Sorry, something happened with the technology, as usual. By saying how we see ourselves, again, we're not opponents. It's security and developers together. So we both, when we're working for a company or for a project, we both work professionals, security professionals, and developers. That we are the most important asset in the project. We're gods. We are there to deliver. We don't care what everyone else is doing. But this isn't true. In the end of the day, as I said, we need to collaborate. We think in the project that we are the ones that we are responsible for providing assurance, providing compliance for our projects. In the end of the day, providing a software, a product that will help our customer sleep well at night. Don't wake up in the night, super anxious about if our product works well. And as I said, we think we're gods, and this is how we see ourselves. However, and if you move to the next slide, please, we'll see that everyone else sees both developers and security professionals totally differently. They think and they see us as the ones that are always the showstoppers, that we stop, uh, we destroy the party, if you wish. We stop the party. We need to do everything perfect. We need to do everything super secure or develop everything as we think we should. And we don't, in the end of the day, care about our customers' needs. And to be honest with you, neither our internal perception nor the outside perception is totally wrong. However, and if you go to the next slide, we'll see that in the end of the day, businesses also think, share the external perception, the perception others have for us, that we're trying to stop things for being agile, that we're trying to, by putting our profession at the spotlight, that we don't care about the business objectives, that we don't care about what the business needs to do. And in the end of the day, that we don't care about who's paying our salary. In other hands, and if you go to the next slide, please. In the other hand, the companies need to move fast. And imagine we are in a scenario, in a landscape, we think ourselves like being gods, so we don't take a second opinion, most probably. Others see us as stoppers. We don't involve us in projects because we think we're delays. And on the other hand, the company needs to move quickly. So where do we stand? What should happen in the end of the day? Are we here to support the company succeed? In other words, being quick and agile? Or are we here for our personal interest in the end of the day? I would say the second. And to be honest with you, this is our role. This should be our role. We should be the means for our companies to succeed and beat competition. Beat competition means two things, if you think about it. Develop and produce the software, the product, as soon as possible, and deliver it in a secure way, because no company would like to be headlines in the news by their software being hacked or being exploited by adversaries. And everything would be fine. I mean, we have our perceptions, others have their own perception. In the end of the day, we manage to cooperate and collaborate and produce our products. But is this enough? As security professionals, we have constantly evolving needs. And why is that? Because the technology always evolves. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that during the years, from the mainframe era to nowadays that everyone is producing content through their mobiles and the social media, etc., we always have emerging threats, escalating threats, new threats. Now we're talking about AI and the threats AI brings. Are we ready to produce our software and protect our software from these threats? Can we do that? Some people say yes, we can. Some people say no. How are we going to do that if we're not involved in projects because people see us as a delay? How are we going to do that if by being involved in the projects we want to do things in our own way, in our own pace, with the perfect technology or the perfect security? We won't. So we need to adapt, we need to be fast, we need to be involved in the project in order to defend against all those emerging threats. And even if those threats are not enough, the new threats that we constantly face and our software needs to defend against, we also have new regulations that come along the way. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the regulations that are the most important for the software that we're developing today, that our customers ask us to deliver. And this is the most prominent regulatory frameworks that our customers needs their software to be compliant with. And this is not going to be easier. I mean, historically, we see more and more regulations. There's no way a regulation gets out of the window. Most probably, it's going to be hardened, more difficult, and more demanding. So, how are we? In the end of the day, how are we going to be in such an environment? We are going to be, if we need to be successful, we need to be like the figure in the next slide, like someone trying to do, trying to balance. Please go, let's go to the next slide, please. In order to be successful in this environment, let's wait for the next slide, please. That's it. So in order to be successful in this environment, the fast-paced environment with the new threats, the new regulation, where anyone thinks we are a delay and we see ourselves as gods, in the end of the day, we need to have a perfect balance. We need to be able to walk in on a rope with a big gap below us, and not only that, dressed in a heavy armor. We need to be flexible, we need to be balanced, and we need to be protected. So how are we going to do that? We need to be in an environment that provides stability and not be showstoppers. Let's go to the next slide. If we're going to be successful in what we're doing, we need to, again, not be showstoppers, provide the perfect balance in an evolving world, and in the end of the day, doesn't matter how good the software is if it doesn't have a minimum security. You can deliver the best software ever. If it's not secure, in the end of the day, it's not going to be used, and it's going to become a liability for your customer. I'm not saying and I'm not claiming that we need to have security as the first priority, but we need to have security as one of the first thoughts in what we're building. Security has to be built in what we're building. Cannot come afterwards as an add-on. Usually it's too expensive in order to do that. So this has to happen, and all this has to happen with the requirement, having in mind the basic requirement for our customers, for the companies that we work for. We need, in order for them to be successful, we need to deliver our software first in the market. So we need to be quick. We cannot spend months of designing security. We cannot spend months of designing features. We need to be quick. We need to be quick, and not only that, we need also to work perfectly as a team, because in a team that delivers software, apart from the developer, there's also the designer. We have QAs, we have DevOps, we have security guys, and if you go to the next slide, you need to have the team working as a clock, as a Swiss clock, as I said, or as a Formula One team. You see a Formula One team change the tires in the vehicle under 2 seconds. If we take this equivalent to the way we deliver software, we develop software, we need to be able to provide new version of the software. The requirement is to provide it within 2 weeks. What can happen in 2 weeks? Are you going to deliver, develop, design, test, implement, secure? A lot of things to happen within 2 weeks, and some people might say, okay, forget it, you're dreaming. Wake up, come down to the real world, and let's follow the process that says that we deliver software every 3 months. This is a recipe for disaster for companies that need to do digital transformation and need to do go to market quick. We need to be agile. The companies that we work with need to be agile. Otherwise, we will be like the next slide. They will become dinosaurs, and in the end of the day, they're going to be extinct. So Summing up what we said so far, agility is one of the key components, but agility doesn't mean no security. We need to be able to provide the required agility to deliver software in defined timelines and quick timelines. We need to adapt to changing of requirements in some of the cases or in most of the cases. We need to adapt to emerging threats and new regulations, as I said, and all those need to happen in a secure way. So our employers, the customers the companies that we work for, sorry, and the customers, the end customers, the people that are using our application are happy. And don't make me wrong, don't take me wrong. I'm not saying uh, something that cannot be done. I'm not saying something that is out of the norm. These things, in most of the cases, have been already resolved. And if we go, if the technology allows me to, if we go to the next slide, you'll see that the previous one, please. You'll see that the agility in software delivery and software development is not a fresh idea. People have been talking about agility for at least the past 10, 15 years. And there are different agile methodologies in place that companies can follow in order to develop and deliver software in strict timelines, in shift timelines, within 2 or 3 weeks per release or per feature. So agile is not something new. Agile is an iterative approach that, as I said, is in place for the at least 10 years or so. And it's here to stay. The question, though, is agile is a very nice methodology, but you've been talking about security as well for the past 18 minutes or so. How does security fit in this diagram? Before going to that, I need to stress out something very specific that will lay the foundation of what we're going to discuss when it comes to agility and security. Agile is an iterative approach to project management and software delivery, etc. So it's based on iterations. Agility doesn't mean chaos. Agility doesn't mean disorganization. Agility doesn't mean to do things without documentation. Agility doesn't mean we need to do things without controlling things. Agility, in the end of the day, doesn't mean the next slide. Agility, in the end of the day, means to do more with less, in the end of the day. And that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind following the discussion we're going to have. Let's go to the next slide when we will start discussing security specifically in the agile cycle. So as we said, the agile methodology is an iterative process, a shift iterative process. Each cycle shouldn't last more than 2 to 3 weeks, which means that if we need to produce secure code and develop securely, we need to be able to pack certain tests, certain controls within this life cycle, this cycle. However, adding these controls doesn't mean we extend the life cycle. We need to keep it under 3 weeks for sure. So I'm not going to go through specific details on the controls, but there are certain things that we need as developers with support of security professionals. It's not the security professional to do this work. It's our work as developers to do that. The security professional is there to advise if required and to give us guidance. But as we develop software, we need to be able and we need to have in mind to maintain and deliver data flow diagrams, architectural diagrams, to analyze the code for vulnerabilities, to analyze the developed product in the end of the day as dynamic security testing, to engage in penetration testing, to do patching. All of these need to happen within the same cycle. Of course, in different phases of the cycle, but nevertheless, the same cycle. And this shouldn't further delay the cycle. And that's the most important thing. This, by adding security to agility, doesn't mean complicate things, doesn't mean delaying things. It means mainly automating things in such a way so security is embedded as not an add-on, as we said, and also is done in such a way that not doesn't delay but give us an advantage. What advantage do we have? Imagine that you're delivering a software and you identify vulnerability after the QA. What would happen then? You have two options. Actually, your management has two options. Either release the software with the vulnerability embedded and cross their fingers that nothing happens until the next release, or delay the release and fix the vulnerability. Both scenarios are catastrophic from my perspective. I'm not sure if which one is worse. Actually, I don't want to decide, to be honest with you. Depends on a case by case scenario. The idea is that by embedding security controls within the agile cycle, to be able to identify the flaws, the vulnerabilities as early as possible, so it's easier and cheaper to fix. And that's the idea. We're adding security controls not to delay things, not to complicate things, to identify problems as easy as possible. Let's move to the next slide, if you wish. How do we do that? Imagine you're going to deliver a new feature and you start thinking of how to secure it. As a security professional, I would say, and I would tell you, and it's been, everyone lived that and had at least an example of that, that there are projects that delayed because of over securing things. We need to add this and that one, and why not adding the next one and do some encryption and do some firewalling and doing some data leakage and whatever. If you start, you never end. And this is a trap that we shouldn't be into if we need to remain agile. What we can do, and it's part of the agile methodology as well, it's defined in the agile methodology as well, is the notion of the MVP, the minimum viable product. In order for development teams to be able to be agile, they do not focus on delivering the overall the full product or the full software at one, but instead they releases iterations, adding new features from time to time. And this is how this has been proven to be useful and to serve the agility notion that we need to serve. So my question and my proposal is, since this has worked very well to the to the software development agile methodology, why don't we adapt it and why don't we use it as a notion to also provide security in this agile methodology without again overcomplicating things or being or delaying things. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this is the basic question. Even in the minimum viable product, we release a new feature, we release something very specific in iterations. So we plan different iterations. How much security should we put in the end of the day? If you ask a security professional, most probably because he has the perception of being a god that we said in the beginning, they will tell you we need to secure everything. Then forget agility, if you ask me. If you ask a developer or an agile product owner, perhaps he say, okay, no security. We don't have time for security. Let's release it as is, and we think of security afterwards. Again, if you ask me, a recipe for this for a disaster because you create technical debt, and this technical debt is never going to be resolved. So if you move to the next slide on the how much security, in the end of the day, it's very simple. It's again, the notion of minimum viable product, we need to adapt it to think of the minimum viable security. Because as I said, if you have an MVP and you put all the security of the world on it, forget agile, forget, it's not going to be MVP, it's going to be something totally different. So to the question, how much security is the security? If you go back to the previous slide, please, is the security, is the intersection between the security we as professionals ask for and the security the customer will buy. Because believe it or not, in the end of the day, the customer might want something now that it's somehow secure, and they don't want to wait a year from now to have the ultimate security. Believe it or not, it's proven. So this is the notion of the minimum viable security, the security the customers will buy for the feature or the iteration you want to release. And how do we define that in the end of the day? Because, okay, it's a nice drawing, but we need to define that. Here we come as an assistance, like as security professionals, and if you go to the next slide, in order to identify the minimum viable security, it has to be what we call a risk-based approach. So you need to see your feature you're going to deliver or the software iteration you're going to produce and send out to market. What are the features that it has that may pose a security threat to the customer data, to the company, etc., etc., and see these threats how possible are to be exploited. So you have a list of the threats, you have the list of the possibilities, and in the end of the day, you have to prioritize what are the most risky things you need to cover within this cycle. So in order to have the MVP and the minimum viable security within the 3 months, the 3 weeks, sorry, that we said. In the end of the day, this risk-based approach is governed by the risk appetite the company is willing to take. There are companies that say, okay, I don't want to be in the news. I don't want to be, I want minimum risk. And they give you the time to produce the software in a more secure way. So the MVP and the minimum viable security, the MVS, takes longer for the go to market. There are other companies that are risk averse and they say, okay, I see the risk, but I'm willing to take it because if I go to the market tomorrow, I'll beat the competition that is going to go to the market next week, and I'll take the risk. That's fine. It's not on us to decide; it's on us to advise. So, but in order to know that, to calculate the risk effectively, you also need to know uh, what's at stake in the end of the day. What's at stake means how much risk am I going to take? And if you go to the next slide, I think it's going to be more illustrative. How much risk I'm going to take and how am I going to manage the risk? So my customer, the company doesn't accept risk, so I need to secure things. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna select some specific controls. I'm gonna put perhaps encryption or anonymization, or I'm going to delete the data every second day, or whatever. I'm gonna have access control, strict access control. I'm gonna have logs in place, etc. And in some cases, this is not even enough. There are cases that you cannot take the risk approach because the company needs to comply with GDPR. So you have to do it. There's no risk to take. Either you comply and stay in business, or you don't comply and you're out of business. Keep in mind that the risk approach is very useful when no compliance is at stake in the end of the day. However, the risk-based approach, in most of the cases, when you don't have personal data or financial data, is your friend, is your ally, because it will help you to have the minimum viable security for your product to be released in an agile way. And if you go to the next slide, it's a requirement in order to have this MVP and MVS. And I think it goes without saying. I mean, I would say that if you're developing a software that you don't know what it's doing, then you're not developing a software, you're playing a bet. Uh, Considering the thing that uh, we all developing our software, and at least we have the requirements and we know what we need to do. Um, Based on that, and based on the assets that the software is managing, the information it's handling, etc., we are in a very good position to do the risk management. Without that, we cannot, we don't manage risk. We play bets, and let's go to a casino better instead of developing software. If we go to the next slide, and this is a process of risk identification. I'm not gonna to dive into it, but in the end of the day, and based on the company that we work with and the appetite of the company, how much risk they're willing to take, the process is sounds simple at least. Again, you're not gonna do it alone. You're gonna need the security professional to help you with it, especially in the beginning. But in the end of the day, first step, you identify the asset that your software is handling, what data it's using, is managing or processing or storing, what system is using, etc., etc. You see what threats these assets are facing, the possibility of a threat taking place. For instance, you might have a piece of software that's vulnerable, but it's behind the firewall, so exploitation is not possible. Would you fix it? I would say you would fix it. The question is, would you fix it first or last? Depends on the other risk you need to prioritize. And this is an exercise of prioritization in the end of the day. So, what are the assets? What are the threats these assets are facing? How possible are these threats to be exploitable? What's the cost of fixing it as well? And all these factors with the calculation will give you a rating. Usually, what we do is we prioritize fixing the highs and criticals, which in this matrix are the red ones. And then, if we have time in the agile cycle, we fix the rest. If not, we put them in the backlog and we fix them as normal backlog items in our backlog. That's the way to do the risk assessment in the end of the day. But then again, the question comes and says, okay, I'm a developer. I know the assets that my application is handling, but who's gonna tell me about threats? Who's gonna tell me about risks? Who's gonna tell me about controls? What I can do to fix things? Here at this point, we have a lot of frameworks that can come to our assistance. I'm just listing the most common ones. The ISO, it's an international standard. A PCI is a standard about credit cards and financial information. NIST is a US standard, and ICPI is an accounting standard. So, depending on the industry that our customer is working or our employer is working, most probably we're going to be a specific framework that we need to follow. If we are not obliged to follow any of these frameworks, then my proposal would be to go to play safe and play simpler. And if you go to the next slide, is a very simple and very useful, though, however, and very practical framework, security framework that can be of great assistance to development teams when they're going to do minimum viable security. It's a CIS top 20 control list. If you Google it, you see that. And there are specific controls. If you take it, you are going to have 80% of the possible threats in your application resolved. For the rest 20, for sure you need to come for assistance or security professional. But having those 20 simple or fairly simple controls in place, as I said, you're going to have 80% of your problems resolved. If we go to the next slide, let's go to the next slide, please. In the end of the day, what you need to have in mind, you've done your risk analysis, you know your threats, you know the controls you need to have in place, you have the guidance of the frameworks, And the next logical step is to see of all those requirements with regards to security, what do you have in place and what you need to fix. This is called gap analysis in our environment, in our world as security professionals. And in the end of the day, the result should be a plan, an action plan of things that you need to fix, either within the current release or as part of the backlog. And everything needs to have a priority, either strict priority because it's regulation, or softer priority because it's not regulation, but it's based on the risk calculation you did and the risk appetite of the organization that you work for. Another, if we go to the next slide, let's try the next slide, please. I would say that summing up, another approach is fairly recent. The MVP and MVS, it's slightly older, but a fairly recent project approach to securing software in agile methodologies is called minimum viable secure product. Not minimum viable security, minimum viable secure product. It's, as I said, a fairly a more recent methodology. It's based on a checklist. So in the end of the day, you have a checklist of the things that you need to check in order to ensure that your release is secure enough. And it's a checklist that has business controls, application controls, operation controls, etc. I'm not going to dive into details. This is not the objective of this speech. It's just to give you ideas. You can look for it, and in the end of the day, you can come back and discuss further if you wish. Let's move to the next slide, please. This actually is the sum up of my today's presentation. I hope I didn't bother you too much. I tried to be not technical, as I said, and I tried to break out the perception that we have internally and how the world is looking at us by discussing agile ways to not only to deliver software, but to deliver secure software. In the end of the day, it's if you ask me, it's a matter of perception, a matter of culture. We cannot change the perception of how people are looking at us if we don't succeed in supporting our organizations in their business objectives in today's agile world. Again, if we continue being the showstoppers, in the end of the day, we're gonna be continuing being seen as such, and the perception will never change. We need to be seen, start being seen as enablers, and this is, if there is one thing to take away from today's discussion, is this: we are here not to do things in a perfect way. We're here to support our companies doing things in an agile, well enough and secure enough way to make sure that they succeed in today's world without being target or being subject to being in the news because of adversaries or breaches or whatever. Having said that, next slide is a little summary of me, of who I am. As I said in the beginning, I'm more than 25 years in the field of information security and cyber security and privacy. I hold a number of certain certifications throughout these years. I have worked in various projects. I actually started as a developer, so I can claim that I know your pains. And this having started as a developer has also enabled me to be able to speak like that in such events. I am passionate about embedding security in everyday lives that we did, because believe it or not, even in everyday lives we do things like risk management, we do things about security, etc., etc. In the end of the day, I like and I love being an enabler to companies, to my customers, because these days I'm working as a freelancer as well, to achieve their goals and their objectives in a secure way. And I like to talk security in business jargon, because in the end of the day, management in business that pays our salary and pays for security or pays for software delivery, etc., they care about money. They don't care about technical characteristics. So if you go and speak to them technically, most probably you won't get what you need. Having said that, thank you all for your time. Let's have, I don't know, the next 5 minutes or so for questions, if there are any questions. And if not, my contact information is in the last slide. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm happy to discuss whatever you need. Thank you all for being here.